My younger brother wanted to visit a haunted school for Halloween. He recently fell in love with ghost hunting YouTube channels but wasn't ready to buy all the equipment to go on a hunt himself. But he wanted to still go to any haunted locations. I didn't exactly have the time to drive him around. I kept putting off hanging out with him until now. At first, the plan was to just drop him off at the school and pick him up later. Ben was 15 after all. The principal refused to let him explore the school alone, which I understood. I traded my shift and packed up my sibling for a boring day out. Sorry, you're stuck with me for a few hours. Wouldn't you rather go to a Halloween party instead of hanging out with me? I joked to him on the drive to the school. He didn't look as excited as I expected when he got into the car. Maybe he was a bit nervous. I wasn't invited to one. He said in an even voice, but I could tell he was upset. I shouldn't have brought up his lack of social life. He was a shy and nerdy kid. It's not as if he didn't have any friends. They just preferred to play games online rather than hang out together. Well, I bet they're all lame parties anyway. Who cares about drunk people dressed in skimpy costumes when you could explore a haunted school? I said, trying to lighten the mood. He smiled and I relaxed a little. Sorry, you gave up a shift for me. Ben commented and the mood shifted again. I shook my head, not wanting to have this sort of conversation. I traded a shift, not gave it away. Don't worry about it. Money has been tight for us the past few years. We all made sure Ben got what he needed and some of what he wanted. I got a job early to help pay for things. He wasn't a dumb kid. He noticed the extra shifts and penny pinching. I think he felt guilty that he hadn't been able to find a side hustle that brought in money aside from mowing lawns in the summertime. We arrived at the school after nearly an hour of driving. The light of the afternoon was orange due to the season. I didn't know how long Benny wanted to stay here. An hour? 2. Until nighttime. The building didn't appear special. It was older. Ben told me it was built in the 60s. And it was still in use aside from some rooms being off limits. A man met us at the front doors inside. He was tall and thin with tied-back black hair. I didn't expect the principal to look like him. Instead of a balding middle-aged plump man, he was a handsome slightly older man with hints of wrinkles at the corner of his eyes. Thank you for sharing your time and letting us explode tonight, I said to the man and shook his hand. Ben awkwardly did the same, nodding and acting nervous around a stranger. Normally he wasn't this shy. This is Ben. He was the one who asked permission, right, mister? I trailed off, not remembering his name. Chambers. The principal was helpfully added. I don't mind giving up my Halloween to help a young man with a report. It's not often students are interested in the history of this building. He explained. Report? I glanced at my brother and he looked away. So that's why he was acting weird. He lied to be able to hang around this building tonight. It was a harmless white lie, but I decided to make my brother actually do a report and send it to Mr. Chambers as a thank you for his time. A gust of wind rattled the front doors. I looked over my shoulder to see the sky suddenly gray. I didn't remember seeing dark clouds when we walked inside. A small rumble came under our feet. It wasn't as loud as thunder, but what else would it be? No one else seemed to notice. Mr. Chambers gestured for us to start walking down the hallway as he started to go into details of the school. I only half paid attention. I had graduated high school a year ago. Since then, I worked my butt off to save up for college. I was accepted into a course and would start next fall. Being inside a high school felt odd. I never expected to be back in one. We stopped in front of a long line of lockers, but oddly enough a door had been removed from one. The metal was dusty from years of neglect. In 1971, 6 students and a staff member went missing. There had been rumors they found the head of one student inside this locker. However, there are no official reports detailing such events. The idea remained causing any student to be assigned the locker to be tormented by their classmates. We removed the door years ago to avoid such bullying. Mr. Chambers said in a calm voice. He was a good speaker. His tone was even and easy to follow. I hadn't looked into any history of the place beforehand. All I knew was it might be haunted thing. I stood behind Ben and placed a hand on his shoulder, causing him to slightly flinch. I liked teasing him and didn't get to do it very often now. Ben wrote a few things down and took a photo of the locker with his phone. Sorry, I don't know much about this place. Were the students ever found? I asked the principal as we walked down the hallway to the next location. Not all of them. He answered with a slight shrug. So, they found at least one of them alive or? I said, following behind Ben and the man. Oh, no, I meant they found some parts of them. Mr. Chambers corrected himself. Normally I wasn't affected by ghost stories, but the casual way he spoke about such a gruesome crime made my skin crawl. It bothered Ben as well. Reaching down, I grabbed his sides and made a noise at the same time to make him jump. His face flushed red as his leg kicked out trying to get me. Mr. Chambers smiled, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes making him appear older for a moment. We finally stopped in front of a locked classroom. A sign had been taped to the door warning people to stay out. Our guide stepped next to the door ready to dump more information before unlocking it. All photos and reports of the event have been destroyed or lost. All we have left are second-hand accounts of the people who witnessed the gruesome sight that was found on Halloween night in 1972. Mr. Chambers started. Wasn't it 1971? I spoke up, unable to help myself. Ben glanced at me. The principal didn't appear offended but was glad to see I had been paying attention. Yes, the 7 people went missing in 1971. Their bodies only appeared a year later. Pieces of the 6 students were found inside this classroom arranged in a way people described to be a part of a ritual. All the heads were missing. They all appeared healthy before their deaths, as if they were taken care of over the year they went missing. Since there are no photos and sparse eyewitness accounts, no official details of the ritual-like crime are available. Benny appeared interested. He was so engrossed in the story, I bet he would jump out of his skin if I grabbed him again. I held off, crossing my arms. This all felt like a weak story to me. Did the ritual thing even happen? Or do you think stories got exaggerated over time? I suggested, only to have Ben kick my shin. Mr. Chambers softly laughed at us and nodded his head. That's entirely possible. He agreed, which disappointed my little brother. There are simply not enough facts in this case. What is known for certain is the 7 people disappeared. 6 students were found inside this classroom a year later with pieces missing. The staff member was never found. Due to the lack of information, countless rumors spread. A few stuck. Most claimed the staff member killed the students in some sort of satanic ritual. The police handling the case was a small, inexperienced department and never solved the case. That added to the rumors. It was a long time ago. They didn't have computers and all that back then, so I don't blame them for losing records. I heard there had never been a murder in this area, let alone 6. I think I read one of the students was a deputy's niece. He killed himself years later because he could never find her murdered. Ben said, showing off just how much he researched this crime. I wish he put the same kind of effort into his math homework. Mr. Chambers was nodding along, but he looked a little concerned over something. Was 1971 really that long ago? He asked, mostly to himself. He didn't look to be in his 50s until I squinted a little. I bet he was having the same kind of crisis I did whenever I heard kids speaking in newer slang. I understood the feeling of suddenly being aware of your graying hair. Anyway, you'll be able to take photos for your report. I just ask you to not enter the room, Mr. Chambers said, then reached over to unlock the classroom door. For some reason, I felt my heart start beating faster. I unconsciously held my breath, almost expecting to see the still dead bodies of the students trapped inside. It was a silly idea, and yet, the mental image didn't leave. A burst of cold, dry air came from the room when the door was opened. Just before Mr. Chambers let go of the handle, a sound echoed down the hallway, causing all of us to jump. A phone rang loud and angry. The older man chuckled over his reaction and told us he needed to answer the phone or call the person back. We assured him we would be fine alone for a few minutes and let him rush down the hallway. Ben raised his phone and carefully started to take photos of the dark classroom. He needed to put his flash on to see inside. The room was empty, with the floor warping from years of disuse. The windows had been covered with cardboard. Small cracks of dull gray light came through. Even the blackboard had been removed. "Why are you so interested in this?" I asked my brother. Somehow, my voice sounded wrong. It was as if we shouldn't speak next to a place like this. "I dunno, he started, unsure if he wanted to tell me. I placed my hands on his shoulders, tempted to hug him. He was getting older, so signs of affection like that didn't fly anymore. No matter how old he got, I knew I would always see him as my baby brother. I wondered if he would grow taller than me. Right now, I was a head taller than him. I liked the idea of people's memories sticking around. We don't know what happened to these people, but we know their names. They're a little sign honoring them and everything. I think it'll be there for years." I had no idea he cared about stuff like that. Was he having a middle-aged crisis before he outgrew his baby face? What made his brain worry about these things? "That's sweet you remember their names," I commented, and he jabbed an elbow into my gut. "Don't call it sweet," he said, annoyed. I smiled, unable to help myself. This poor kid was concerned about so many things, some of which didn't matter. Why? Because it's not all alpha male? I teased. "Stop," he said with his cheeks getting red. "In case you didn't notice, we don't come from a very manly bloodline. A light burst of wind could topple all the guys in our family. Embrace being cute and delicate. It's in our blood." I bent down to hug him from behind and tried to rub my cheek against his. I think the last time I smothered him like this he was 10. He yelled, trying to get out of my grasp. We wrestled for a few minutes, little Benny unable to gain much distance. His foot slipped inside the classroom. He jolted back with such a horrified expression on his face I thought something was wrong. I let go, concerned over his reaction. Ben's breathing started to get heavy, with tears appearing in his eyes. I was confused by the sudden change. "Hey buddy, did you roll your ankle or something?" I asked, wondering if I had been too rough. "No, he stuttered, then took a moment to collect himself. I just felt wrong. I can't explain it. I patted his shoulder. This place must be getting to him. How about we leave early? Maybe your blood sugar is messed up or something. I offered. He chewed on his lip, not really wanting to take me up on my offer. Footsteps came from down the hallway. Mr. Chambers came back, unaware of how Ben was feeling. "What are you kids up to?" he asked in a friendly tone. He must have heard our roughhousing from down the hall. Sound carried well in this place. "Mr. Chambers," I asked, my voice suddenly filled with dread. "Are we the only ones in this building?" He nodded, confused. "Yes, why?" he asked, staring in our direction, not understanding our change in expression. "Then who is behind you?" He had stopped walking down the hallway when he first spoke. I had noticed a dark shape I assumed to be his shadow until it stood up. My hand flew to Benny's, gripping it tight, my body getting ready to run. The shadow looked to be a very tall and thin person lacking any features. Then, a smile appeared on its face just as Mr. Chambers turned to look at it. Instead of appearing afraid, he looked almost disappointed seeing such a creature. It was as if he thought we were childishly pranking him. A clawed hand shot out, digging into his stomach. Within seconds, the hand ripping out all sorts of important flesh and organs, spilling them onto the ground. The older man didn't scream or make a sound. His body fell limp into the creature to helplessly be further ripped apart. We were too scared to scream. We just ran. Our shoes hit the floor hard, slipping in places. The shadows followed us. The lockers flew open as countless dark hands shot out, trying to rip at us. Benny tripped. On instinct, I scooped him up to keep running, thanking God we did in fact come from a family with the men on the shorter side, making him easy to carry. I saw the front doors and turned to crash into it. My brother was in my arms as I used my back to open the glass doors, heart racing. We should have gotten out. Instead, I found us walking back into the school. Did I get turned around somehow in my panic? I set Ben down and dragged him along to go through the doors again. Only to walk back into the school. I screamed in frustration. How was this possible? Okay, so we did see a shadow monster. The front doors magically not letting us outside were no longer out of the realms of possibility. Windows! Ben shouted. He took my hand to drag me into a classroom. The far wall was nothing but a line of windows. When we entered the room, desks and chairs started to move, trying to get in our way. We jumped over them, reaching the other side to bang on the glass. I had picked up a chair to smash the window just as Benny unlocked on and opened it. That worked. I pushed him through first. To my horror, he came tumbling back out through a suddenly open window next to me. I swore a few times, using words my little brother had never heard me say before. The activity in the room was getting too chaotic. We got out before getting crushed by some desks. For the moment the hallway was clear of the shadow hands, giving us a second to regroup. "We can't get out," Ben said in a shaking voice. "They totally did a ritual in 1972. I said, and he furiously nodded, agreeing. I played this game with a haunted school where you needed to collect the body parts of the students. Maybe we need to do that. Make them whole and we can leave," he suggested, on the verge of a breakdown. "Buddy, that's a game though," the words just slipped out. He made a squawking noise and then spread out his arms, gesturing at the situation we were in. Okay, sure, game logic could make sense. We were dealing with shadow monsters and possessed school equipment. I wish I could say we had a plan. We avoided the shadows and tracked down the body parts to please the restless spirits. I really wish this had a happy ending. Instead, I suddenly felt a white-hot pain in my back, and then the feeling in my legs was cut off. Looking down, I saw my bother splattered with blood. I was scared to death that he had somehow gotten hurt until I glanced at my stomach to see 3 long dark claws coming out from in. Benny started to wail. The claws were ripped sideways, and my body fell to the ground in pieces. I can't even start to describe the pain. I was scared of death, but my last thought before the darkness took over was how I regretted bringing Ben here. I woke up. I should not have woken up. My body jolted, fear and panic clouding my brain. I found myself bound to a chair in the middle of an empty classroom. The boarded-up windows told me what room we were sitting in. Benny was next to me, also tied to a chair, passed out. Thankfully I didn't see any wounds on him. Slowly his head raised. Our eyes met and he started to scream. He nearly tipped over his chair trying to get away from him. I had been ripped apart in front of his eyes. I don't blame him for the reaction. When you were 6 you left the fridge open all night at Christmas because you wanted Santa to get more food for all the reindeer and bring some back for the elves. I told Mom and Dad the fridge just died overnight so you didn't get in trouble. I said, trying to sound calm. He stopped struggling, eyes wide, trying to decide if he could trust me. Ben assumed I was some sort of monster disguised as his dead sibling instead of the person he cared about coming back to life. You, he sputtered, holding back more tears. Go ahead and cry. I told him. I wanted to just hold him and cry too. He quietly sobbed for a few minutes, rubbing his wet cheeks against his shoulders. My heart hurt that he was going through all this. But I was glad he trusted me enough to act more like a kid when we were alone. I felt like when he was with our parents Benny acted too mature. He needed to just relax once in a while and not worry about what others thought. I'm sorry. If I didn't dash, he started. Don't. I cut him off with a stern voice. This is not your fault. Don't ever blame yourself. Footsteps came from the door as it was opened. A person walked over in front of us. Someone Ben didn't expect to see walking around, but I did. I glared at him with clear hatred. He's right. It's not your fault. I didn't even know this was going to happen until it did. Mr. Chambers said, his voice sounding cold and distant. Bullshit. I shouted back. He didn't react. A cold feeling came to the back of my neck. I glanced behind us to see the tall dark figure, its shape flickering. My stomach rolled, making it hard to keep a brave face. A ritual was performed by the school principal back in 1971. The goal was to bring forth dark creatures into this world. Instead, this new layer was created. No one can come in or out unless the layer lets them. No one can die. The ones trapped in here shall forever remain stuck in time regardless of how much suffering they endure. It seems as if the seal on this place weakened enough to let you two inside. It's happened before. But all the others were able to escape before the seal closed. Bad luck for you too. The older man shrugged, sounding like he was simply telling us the weather and not how we were doomed. Ben's bottom lip started to tremble. This was far too much for him to handle. I strained against the rope, trying to get free of the chair. I couldn't accept this. There has to be a way out. I shouted, voice raw. Mr. Chambers shook his head, then paused. It was poor acting. He had been waiting to make this offer since he walked into the room. The seal is weak enough to let one of you leave. The one that remains here will be tormented without any rest or escape. This place is fueled by negative emotions. The more intense, the better. It appears as if I've gotten used to it all. Thus, Wyatt opened up to bring another victim inside. I narrowed my eyes trying to spot a lie. Mr. Chambers did appear dead inside. He sounded nothing like the person we first met. Benny made a sound snapping me from my thoughts. "I'll stay," I shouted before my brother could speak. "No," he yelled back, sounding like a child. "I was the one who asked to come here. I should dash. I'm staying. That's final." I used my best older sibling's voice to shut him up. He lowered his head, failing to hold back more tears. It hurt so much seeing him like this. I don't think there could be any physical pain these monsters could inflict that would ever be greater than how I felt at that moment. "I don't want you to leave. I barely have any friends. I just wanted us to hang out before you left for college. I can't." My heart sank deeper into my chest. I wasn't aware he had been that stressed out about me moving away next year. Mr. Chambers watched us with a cold and emotionless expression. He didn't care which one of us stayed, as long as he had a new plaything. "Benny, listen to me. I love you. No matter where I am, or how much time passes, that will never change. You're a great person. You just need to see that. I know you'll make friends. You don't need that many. You'll find a person who will see how special you are. I'm a baby." He sniffled. "So what? Be immature. Keep playing the games you like and collect awesome toys. You can be 40 and still have the same interests you did when you were a teenager. Just keep being you. You're a good, kind person. That's all that matters." He raised his head and I put on my best smile. I wanted to see him grow up. I wanted to watch him get friends and get taller than me. I wanted to hear about his weird interests and cover for him when he got in trouble with my parents. "From what I'm hearing, you both would like to stay. I need a clear answer from each of you," the older man said in a stern tone. I nodded at my brother, knowing that he'll be all right without me. No matter how painful of a thought that was. "I'm staying," I firmly stated. "I'm leaving," Benny said, holding back sobs. Mr. Chambers raised his hand and snapped his fingers. That was it. Benny disappeared, as well as the chair I had been sitting on. I fell to the floor, free but still stuck inside the school. "I'll give you a few hours to collect yourself. Then we'll start," he said, and started to turn away. "I want the truth. What's really going on here?" I demanded. Something felt off about his words. I couldn't place it. I knew he had been lying, but about what? He crossed his arms behind his back with a sigh. When he spoke again, he sounded like he had when we first met. My twin was the one who performed the ritual. He wanted an army of monsters under his control because he felt like the world owed him more than what he had. Of course, he botched it all up, leaving me to clean up his mess. I made a deal that would seal away what he summoned in this layer as long as those monsters were fed negative emotions. These creatures cannot be sent back. If this seal breaks and this layer disappears, they'll come into the world to attack innocent victims. He explained, and my head started to swim with questions. Why didn't you tell us that? How come you let Benny go without the truth? I asked, somewhat doubting his words. Maybe he was lying to get me on his side for some unknown reason. The shadow monster watched us in the corner of the room. The sharp claws at its side were ready to use when the time came. After a minute he finally looked over with a tired expression. There are some sad people in this world. I didn't want this to get out in case they started to come here offering themselves. They may assume since they're already in pain, then they might as well make their suffering mean something. A heavy silence fell between us. I didn't know what to believe. Was this man a victim or the mastermind behind all of this? It looked like I now had a lot of time to try and figure it out. I'm getting out of here. I don't care what you say. I need to get back to my brother. Mr. Chambers looked me over almost amused at my statement. A sudden thought came to me. Was he here by choice? Or did his bother to force him to stay all those years ago? And what happened to his twin? As if able to read my thoughts to speak again. If I had a better relationship with my brother, then all of this may not have happened. Instead, we both got dragged into the trouble he caused. While you're here, feel free to fight back and insult him all you want. He earned it. A cold breath appeared at the base of my neck. A pair of dark clawed fingers wrapped around my shoulders from behind. A deep cold dread came to my stomach that made it impossible to turn around and face what was just out of sight. The man who wanted power became twisted into something beyond human. And he had been hurting the only one who ever cared about him for years. The hands fell away, letting me breathe again. Mr. Chambers left the room after giving my cell phone an interested glance. I guessed he hadn't seen them too often and wasn't certain of what they could do. The signal was weak. No calls got through. It took a few solid minutes to just load anything. Even if I could contact someone, how can they reach me? Those things are waiting just outside the room. I can hear them. I don't know how much longer I have before they drag me outside to do God knows what. No matter how scared I am or whatever I face, I can't give up. I'll see my brother again someday. I don't care what I have to go through to make that happen.